Few games have a hold of my nostalgic heart the way the Fable series has. But with its 20th anniversary rapidly approaching, does it hold up? Well, no. Video over, click off now and go about your day. Or leave this video playing in the background as you get on with your work, studying or browsing Reddit, and let's go back to the beginning of this franchise and see what made the original game so special. 2004. An unspeakable evil is released upon the world. Every white girl is falling in love with a notebook, and game industry blowhard Peter Molyneux hasn't yet completely tanked his reputation. His latest title, Fable, is being touted, by him at least, as a revolutionary game with morality and choice at its heart. The game had some real hype around it, and as an Xbox title in the midst of the console wars, Microsoft were keen for the game to do well. Now, morality as a game mechanic wasn't an entirely new concept. Gamers had been presented with the choice to be good or bad as early as Streets of Rage, where players were given the choice to continue to work together to defeat the final boss, or to fight each other for the chance to become the boss's right-hand man, or to fight him solo to take his place for yourself. A few years later, point-and-click horror game I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream implemented a more complete system where actions across the entirety of the game would impact your character's morality. However, once again, it only really impacted the ending the player received. By the way, shout out to Gibbons for writing an interesting article about the history of moral choice in video games, link in the description down below. Suffice to say for now that Fable was not the first, but the way Molyneux was talking about it, every choice the player made would impact Albion and the way NPCs would react to your character. Well, that was a lie. Okay, not entirely, but definitely Molyneux overhype, something he would become notorious for in the coming years. The morality system in Fable was certainly present, but its impact on the world was minimal. NPCs would react occasionally, but they were more likely to react to your chosen clothing, or the simple emotes you used to interact with them. And really, there were no consequences to any of your choices. Spoiler alert, you do get chances to kill major characters, but the result of you choosing to do so doesn't really result in anything punishing you for it. Thunder will complain and hold a grudge against you if you choose to kill Whisper, but he won't actually act differently. You'll still have to battle him if you intend to wed Lady Grey, and he'll still assist you at the end of the story when you have to fight your way through to activation points. The only real choice with weight and impact is the very final one, where the game ends and there's no real time to see how the world is impacted by your choices. So far as I can tell, the only real consequence of your choices is growing horns or a halo, so the mechanic tends to feel a bit gimmicky, which is a shame as it had real potential. Small details like your food choices are shown to impact your scores. Tofu is seen as good, whilst crunchy chicks, which are exactly as they sound, naturally give you evil points. But the consequences just don't really hit. Those examples may feel rather light-hearted, and part of the game's redeeming charm is its sense of humour and willingness to poke fun at itself. NPCs will openly mock your hero. For some reason, you'll be known far and wide as a chicken chaser, and keeping in theme with the worrying trend of animal abuse, your stats will record the furthest distance you've kicked a chicken, among other things. There's definitely a very British Monty Python vibe to it, which you will probably either love or hate. And as a Brit, the stereotypes used for accents feels like a nice Easter egg for inhabitants of these fair lands. Although God help you if you're trying to understand Scouse or Geordie with English as a second language.
This here is Twin Blades Camp.
This all belies quite a dark world, with moments that feel like they're much more brutal and adult than you'd expect from a game that encourages you to go around farting on people. The story's inciting incident, the sacking of your hometown and killing of your family, while dark, is not exactly a surprise. But despite hitting a number of predictable tropes, such as the betrayal by your teacher, the revelation your sister and mother are both still alive, and the aforementioned choice to betray your childhood friend, the reality of these moments create a sense that you're in a dark, unforgiving world with true villains. Your sister, for example, while still alive, has been blinded and held captive for the entire time you've been trained as a hero. Your mother, likewise, held and tortured, much like you yourself after your failed attempt to mount a rescue. Even those unrelated to the main story get in on the grim act. A former defender of Not Whole Glade has become the monster he used to hunt. The mayor of the main city in the game, Bowerstone, is implicated in the murder of her sister, and you can still choose to marry her. The triumph of evil over good almost feels inevitable, which makes your morality choices feel kind of justified, something that even many modern games struggle to achieve, making your character feel like they're being a sadistic arsehole just for the sake of it if you stray too far from the good path. Is it perfect? No, But you can see the gem of an idea, and it's these glimmers of brilliance that pull you into the game. The way the setting allows you to feel like you're justified in whichever choice you make. The small but frequent glimmers of humour, and a world that, although plagued by load screens, feels very much alive, with its own myths and dark mysteries hidden beneath the surface. It's frustrating how close the game comes to living up to the hype, while still being so far away. As a teenager when the game released, I remember being enamoured with the world and the story. The morality system felt more impressive, side quests like the demon doors felt intriguing, and so perhaps now, looking back, I'm being a little uncharitable, and the game deserves a little more credit. That said, I'll stand by my next statement. The combat sucks. I remember even on release thinking that combat was a bit simple and kind of stale. Even the arena, which is built up as a challenge, felt more like a chore than anything. Now, I know there will be those out there that feel like the original Fable has the best implementation of magic out of the trilogy, but for me, aside from free spells, the magic felt a bit pointless. And honestly, hitting slow down time and then wailing on enemies with the melee weapon was the one-size-fits-all approach that could overcome any fight. Melee combat basically feels like a button mash fest with no real reward for timing blocks or dodges, and so it effectively turns into you running up to enemies and unloading into them, firing off the occasional spell to keep a crowd from surrounding you, or kiting enemies around whilst firing arrows. Neither approach feels particularly fun or challenging. Speaking of challenge, the biggest challenge you'll probably face is getting the camera and the lock-on system to actually target the enemy you want, and not some random NPC stood behind you. There's probably a top 10 list out there for frustrating cameras in video games, especially from around this period, and I'd have to put Fable close to the top. Okay, so quick moment here to point out this is the original disc release for the Xbox running on an Xbox 360 console. Originally, I purchased a copy of Fable Anniversary on Steam, but apparently the changes go far beyond the cosmetic. Other options all had their own compromises, and so in the end, after digging up an old 360, taking it apart to fix a drive issue, and then troubleshooting connection issues with Xbox Live to get the backwards compatibility patch, and, well, not to guilt trip you or anything, but a sub or a like would make me feel a lot better about neglecting my girlfriend. Yay for internet numbers going up. Anyway, back to Fable. The one downside to the 360 route is that I'm not entirely sure if the next complaints are the game or the backwards compatibility freaking out, but the performance and bugs were pretty painful. Regular stuttering and frame rate drops are something my PC Master Race ass hasn't had to deal with since, well, the last AAA release to be honest. But the fact that my character regularly started to resemble Kermit the Frog, and in another instance kind of looked like something out of Warhammer 40k, was kind of distracting. And god, the loading screens. Don't get me wrong, I understand there were limitations in tech, but some of the zones are entirely unnecessary, and it felt insulting that I was forced to watch a load screen twice just for the privilege of walking down an empty corridor. And then I had to go back. Meanwhile, games releasing at the same time were able to provide comparably huge levels, and I know my SSD spoiled ass has joked about missing being able to read tooltips on loading screens, but by the end of my 15 hours or so with Fable, I was very pleased to leave them behind again. If the spaces were larger or visually more impressive, I might understand, but it feels like some sort of problem in the adaptation of the title from a Dreamcast title, yes really, to Xbox, or just a lack of time for the team to optimize. Talking of visuals, I can't quite make my mind up. The visuals are of course dated, characters are blocky, but the art style does have some charm, and enemies like Hobbs and Wolverines look interesting enough. The humans though, it has to be some sort of commentary or design decision to have so many ugly characters, right? And I'm just going to chalk up Fonda's appearance and voice acting as being a sign of the changes in society over the last 20 years. That said, the newest Fable trailers seem to be continuing the trend of ugly characters, so I guess it is very much an intentional choice and not just a comment on the state of British dental care. My overall takeaway was a kind of excitement to pick up Fable 2 again, because my memories are that that game was visually better and a bit more polished. Melee combat was also a bit more refined too, if my memory serves me right. Although magic became less of a thing, so I know some people complained about that. I also generally can't remember the story or how the world acknowledges the events of the previous game, so maybe I'll have to pick the game up soon. Much like my 2004 self, I'm excited to revisit Albion in the future and see how the game develops the morality systems and the world. Sure, the original Fable was flawed, so very, very flawed, but it was a promising start that drew me into not only the world of Albion, but the vision of what a Fable game could be, and it was full of charm and humour. That said, it definitely doesn't hold up well in 2024. It's a shame that Molyneux would continue to overhype the titles, and as far as I recall, they regularly failed to live up to his hype, essentially turning him and the series into a bit of a meme. That said, it seems like for all his faults, he was the key to keeping Lionhead insulated from the pressures of Microsoft. After his departure in 2012, the studio would be forced to divert attention from Fable 4 and focus on a games as a service offering, the ill-fated Fable Legends, which would be cancelled in 2016 and eventually lead to the studio's closure. Microsoft would later admit that they had mismanaged Lionhead. Fortunately, Fable would be brought to Playground Games, best known for their work on Forza. The game's release date is as yet unknown, but the trailers certainly seem to retain the humour and charm of the original trilogy. Molyneux himself, well, he went on to found 22 Cans, with Godus being their best known title, which unfortunately attracted criticisms due to the crowdfunding campaign, implementation of microtransactions, and lack of updates or support, effectively abandoning the game despite promises of updates. His own blog following his process attracted enough negative comments that he disabled comments, and he remained surprisingly quiet online. Whilst burnt by Godus and Peter's never-ending hype, I can't help but feel the industry is slightly less exciting with his absence. I just have to apologise for the state of the VO and the fact that this video took a little bit longer because, as you may hear, I'm still suffering from a cold.